everyone, it's Steph here if you don't already know, and on this channel I talk about all things career and all things lifestyle. And today's video is my second video in my training contract bootcamp series, and I'm going to be talking to you about how I picked my first and second practice areas. This is a question I've been asked quite a lot recently. I presume it's because a lot of you are going to be starting your training contract, so you want to know what kind of considerations to have. And even with my trainee colleagues who are going into their second, third, and some of them even fourth seats, we've had a lot of conversations around what stuff to consider basically. So I thought I would share my considerations with you just so that you can have an open and transparent idea of what types of things to consider when you want to be picking your seats. If you like this kind of content, please do make sure that you like, comment and subscribe, and give me a follow on Instagram as well, as I post more tips and content there. Okay, so if you follow me on Instagram, you will know that I actually put up a reel where I spoke about what my four main considerations were for my first seat. So the first thing was that from the LPC, I always felt like I was more of a non-contentious person. Non-contentious being that I didn't want to do litigation or arbitration or anything like that, right? So for me, I just thought that logically, given that I've not actually done any non-contentious work, if I think that I'm that type of person, I should probably try to do that type of work earlier on in my training contract, so that if I find out that I don't like it, then at least I've done it and then I can have time to pick other stuff, right? Because I have heard of some people who maybe they thought that they were non-contentious people, or they thought they were contentious people or whatever. They left it until maybe their third or fourth seat because they just thought strategically they would be in a better position to be better trainees at that point in their training contract, but then they found out that they didn't actually like that area. So to me, I just didn't want that fear of thinking I love something, getting to a fairly late stage in my training contract and then realizing that I actually hate it, and then now what do I do next because I've only got one seat left type of thing. Caveat to that, and it's going to be the same caveat to all of the considerations I give you, is that I'm pretty sure there isn't a firm that allows you to just pick. The way majority of the firms work is that you will put down your choices. So you might put down 3 choices, 4, 5, whatever. And then they allocate based off of business need and just what they think is best type of thing. So at the end of the day, the choice is not all in your court, but you can obviously, and you should still obviously, think carefully about what you want to do. Second thing that I kind of looked at was whether it was a big department or a small department. Now for me, this was purely just because I kind of know how I am as a learner, and I just felt like as a first seater, I wanted to have more support, not even from the actual department itself, but from other trainees. And in bigger departments, you are naturally going to have more trainees there. So you could have 7 or 8 trainees, for example. Whereas in a smaller department, it could actually just be you. You could be the only trainee in that department, which means when you're given a task and you inevitably don't have a clue what to do, who do you turn to? Yes, of course, you turn to the associate, right? Who's giving you the task. I get that. But I just found a lot of comfort in knowing that, in the department I'm in, if I get a question that I feel maybe I shouldn't be asking an associate because maybe I should know the answer, but I've just kind of forgotten, I had other trainees that I could lean on. My third consideration was client contact. Now, this was purely just because when I'd spoken to people before I joined, I've just kind of heard which departments tend to give trainees client contact and which departments don't. And for me, I wanted to have client contact straight away. From all of the part-time jobs I've had, I've been very good with calling people, emailing people, all that types of stuff. So I'm not afraid of just having to speak to clients type of thing. And I just wanted to be able to do that from a legal perspective as well. And again, the departments that I put down in terms of my 3 choices, all were departments which were known to have a decent level of client contact, obviously bearing in mind that I would be a first seat trainee, so it's not like they would be letting me run a deal from start to finish type of thing. And then the final thing that I put down was the type of work. And funnily enough, even back from my application days, the type of work that I put down in my applications when I was talking about a deal that I liked were, funnily enough, debt finance deals. And it's only now that I'm reflecting on it that I've realized that they were actually debt finance deals, because at the time I didn't know they were debt finance deals. They were just deals that I thought were interesting, and I knew that the particular firm I was applying to had done that deal, and I thought it was cool. And now that I'm actually working on similar things, I'm kind of like, oh my gosh, like this is what I actually thought I enjoyed when I was applying, and now look at me here doing it. So what I would say to you, especially if you're going to be starting your training contract in the next couple of weeks or the next couple of months, and it's time for you to start picking your first seat, I think those 4 things are the main things that you need to be worried about. So whether it's contentious or non-contentious, and whether you like contentious or non-contentious work. If you don't know, by the way, then put down a mixture, and whatever they put you in is fine, because you're going to have enough like chances to be able to do both contentious and non-contentious work, right? Then also think about the size of the department. Think about whether you will be comfortable in a smaller department, especially earlier on in your training contract. If you will be, perfectly fine. I just knew that I wouldn't be. Also think about client contacts. So like, do you want to be in a department which kind of pushes you a little bit more, gives you a bit more responsibility, and lets you just speak to clients? Or do you want to be in a department which kind of not holds your hand, but just because of the way processes are, you're not actually the one who gets to speak to the client, type of thing. And then also think about the type of work. Like, are these deals that actually interest you? Is this something that you actually want to be doing for 6 months? Because 6 months it goes quickly, but you're working every day for 6 months. Like, it's a lot of time, so make sure it's stuff that interests you. So going into my second seat, my considerations were a little bit different, I'll be honest. And I think that's just because, like, obviously I've already done 6 months. Well, the time that I picked my options for my second seat, it was about 5 months in. So I've already done 5 months at the firm, right? I've kind of seen a lot of things, heard a lot of things, all that kind of stuff. So it's a bit easier for me to go forward and pick my second seat. So I did still start off with the same like contentious versus non-contentious thing. But one thing that I realized after doing 5 months in my training contract is that contentious and non-contentious is actually far more split up than we think it is. Like, I don't know about you guys, but for me, when I was kind of going through life saying like, oh, I don't like contentious work, I like non-contentious work. I was basically just thinking like, I don't necessarily want to go to court, which is what like litigation is, for example. But there's so many different things. Like, you can do like arbitration, which is different. It's still like negotiation, but you don't actually go to court. Like, you go to an arbitration tribunal, so that's a bit different. And even within non-contentious work, it's not just like finance, for example. Funnily enough, the most common thing that a lot of people think about when they think of non-contentious work is your typical corporate space, like your corporate PE, like corporate private equity or corporate M&A, mergers and acquisitions. Mergers and acquisition is probably the one that a lot of people think about when they think about big law. There's also advisory, and advisory can kind of be a hybrid between the two, because a lot of the advisory seats tend to be both contentious and non-contentious. So by advisory, I'm thinking of areas like tax, white collar, intellectual property, employment, all of those kind of like smaller department areas. These are all things that I personally didn't actually really, I guess I just didn't really deep it until I got into my training contract, if I'm being honest. But having like spoken to a lot of the trainees who are in those respective departments, I found that I was considering a lot more. I still wasn't considering the contentious stuff, let me be honest. As for that litigation and arbitration, I don't know. I just feel like learning about Part 36 and the LPC scarred me for life, and I just don't know if I can do that for 6 months. So no. But I was starting to consider like corporate staff, and I was starting to consider the advisory seats as well. And these are things that I hadn't thought about for my first seat. So I would say if you're someone who's coming into your first seat and you're still watching the video at this point, don't like stress and don't worry about it. I don't think you necessarily need to be thinking about this before you get to your first seat anyway, but just be mindful of the fact that as you actually go through your training contract, your mind is probably going to change just because you learn a lot more, and that's normal. So second thing I thought about after kind of going through the whole contentious, non-contentious thing again was supervisors. And this is something I hadn't considered at all for my first seat, but it's so important, I can tell you that for free. Your training contract is like, it relies heavily on how good your supervisors are across your seats, I'll be honest, for a number of different reasons. Like some supervisors, it just depends on the type of work they do, but generally speaking, your main stream of work will probably come from your supervisor, and then you do work for other people in the department, right? So you want to be making sure that across your training contract, you're getting varied work, you're getting interesting work, and you're doing good stuff, because at the end of it, like at the end of the 2 years, you're going to be applying either internally or externally to qualify in a particular department. And in order to do that, you have to submit some kind of CV or something to show that you have done like interesting and varied work, right? So you want to make sure you have a good supervisor. And There are a couple of ways. Again, I feel like this is not something to worry about before your first seat, if I'm being honest, mainly because there's not much you can do. Like if you don't know people in the firm or you don't know the supervisors, how can you prepare for that? So there's not really anything you can do. But once you have done a seat, I would say when you are speaking to trainees and you're saying things like, oh, how do you find the department? What's the work like? All this kind of stuff. Also ask them, like, how do you find the supervisor? How do they train you? Do you feel like you have a good rapport with them? Do you feel like they've helped you network with people in the firm? All of those kind of questions are really key questions that you want to be asking. And even if you don't get like the particular person in mind that you're thinking of as your supervisor, you want to maybe be asking them to give you work so that you can still be working in close proximity with them, right? So you also want to be with people who do good and interesting work so that you can also do good and interesting work. And you want to be with people who are going to take the time to teach you, because at the end of the day, you are there to learn. So that's something that I thought about in terms of picking my second seat choice. What was the third thing that I thought about? I then thought about, so yeah, size of the department again. To be honest, I really enjoyed being in a big department. And again, I think it was just that thing of like, I had a lot of support from the other trainees. I did have a lot of support from like the other associates and even the partners, to be fair. But I think that's a given anywhere. Well, for me, as far as I know, it's a given anywhere. Like you generally will be supported by the people in your team. But that thing of like, you know, sometimes, like I'll give you an example. All the trainees know about this. When you're asked to run a red line for the first time and you haven't got a clue what a red line is or what program you're meant to be using to run a red line, that's not the kind of question that you want to be asking to the associate. You want to be able to ask another trainee like, hey, sorry, what's a red line? Do you get what I mean? Like, so it's nice to have that group of trainees to kind of lean into, and I think I want to have that again, if I'm being honest. Like I just enjoyed it. The client contact thing, yeah, again, I want client contact again, but again, I feel like the further on in your training contract that you go, the more client contact you kind of get anyway. But don't hold me to that, because I don't know if that's like 100% true, but that's just what I think, right? You kind of get more responsibility and stuff as you improve and progress. So yeah, that wasn't like a big consideration for me, but something I thought about. So after thinking about all of that, and after like lining up literally loads of calls with so many different people at different levels, like I spoke to everyone from partners to NQs to supervisors in different departments to trainees who are currently sitting in those seats to kind of make my final choices. And I decided to put down capital markets because, like I said, I've quite enjoyed finance. So I want to see what another type of finance is like, if that basically makes sense. I also put down corporate private equity because I want to try big law. I do. I've always had a bit of an interest in it, and it is nice to see a deal you've worked on in the paper. Like there's no denying that feeling is amazing. So I would like to have a chance to do that. And then I've also put down project finance, and that's purely just because from the beginning I always felt like of all the finance ones, project finance was the one that I thought I would really want to do. So I popped that down as well. And I'll go back to the caveat that I said at the beginning. The way choices or seat choices work, to the best of my knowledge, in all firms, is that you will put down a number of choices that you like. So for me, I put down 3 choices. I know for some people, I know there's firms where you literally put down like 8 choices, and I know there's firms where like you bid. So there's different ways to do it. But the point is, you as a trainee put down a certain number of choices, and then grad recruitment will kind of take your choices into consideration. They will also take what seat you're in into consideration. And then they will look at business needs. It doesn't all fall on what choices I pick. I might not actually be given any of these 3 choices, but hopefully this has helped you, I guess, just kind of see how I actually went about picking my options, both the first and the second time round. I've tried to be as open and as transparent as possible because I understand that this can actually be really difficult. It is really hard to make a choice that is inevitably going to affect the rest of your life. Because at the end of the day, the idea is that you qualify into one of these areas that you pick, right? So it's a big decision. Hopefully me talking through, like, just openly and candidly about how I went about it will help you pick your choices. If you like this kind of just open and honest chit chat content, please do make sure that you like, comment and subscribe. If there's anything else you want me to just be a bit transparent about in terms of the training contract process, drop a comment down below and I will do my best to talk about it. But for now, see you later.